Good morning and good evening, everyone, and welcome to CPMAI webinar. All right, so welcome to our CPMAI quick webinar. So today we'll be discussing about the CPMAI concept and the 7 patterns and some of the CPMAI approaches in the projects. Let me just quickly share my screen. So today we'll be discussing about the CPMAI methodology overview, the high level. And a quick introduction about myself. And my name is Dr. Vishwanadam, and I currently work as an enterprise agile coach and safe transformation coach as well, and a PMI coach and a PMP trainer as well. All right. And today we'll be discussing about the CPMAI approaches. These are the topics which we are going to discuss. All right. Why CPMAI is necessary, and the need for an approach to successfully run and manage the AA projects. Addressing AA projects failure with the CPMAI and the roles and the 7 patterns of CPM. And we'll also explore each pattern of the CPMAI. And then we'll be discussing about the 6 patterns or the 6 phases of the CPMAI and the organization roles and skills needed for the AA success. Then the key roles in AA projects and the CPMAI versus traditional project management. So these are the topics which we are going to discuss on this particular webinar. Then finally, as usual, we'll be discussing about the Q&As. All right. Let me quickly go through the why CPMAI is necessary. Okay. So first, let's understand about the CPMAI concept. CPMAI concept. The CPMAI, it's a vendor-neutral methodology for the managing the AI and ML projects. So the CPMAI, right, it actually creates the common language, especially the AI ML approaches will create the common language across the business data and across the business and data and engineering. So it's actually independent of tools and platforms, okay? So these approaches enable the repeatable governance and the decision-making across the vendors and the ecosystem. It also protects the outcome by focusing on the methods and the evidence. Here, we don't prefer for the tools, by the way. So here we just go with the evidence approaches, and which is nothing but an evidence-based management concepts, okay? And also it follows an iterative approach with a strong emphasis on the data-centric delivery. So the data-centric delivery, right? So let's explore some sort of data-centric delivery model here. So the data-centric approaches is a treats data as a primary constraint and asset. So in this scenario, the quality drives the model's value. In this scenario, quality drives the models and the value. So here, when we talk about iterative approaches, so here we will use the short iteration to learn fast. That's what one of the industry thought leaders says, right? The shorter the duration, the faster the learning, all right? When you have a shorter duration, the shorter duration will enable the faster learning. And these iterative model approaches help us to validate our assumptions. And also, these iterative model approaches will reduce the rework over the period of time. Okay. So the iterative model approaches actually builds design, build, delivery, and the deployment cycle, which is the PDCA cycle model approaches. Okay. It actually designed to increase the success rate of the AI and ML initiatives. It's actually shift from the build a model to the deliver measurable business outcome. It is actually shifting from build a model into the measurable business outcome model approaches. Okay. So for this particular model, right, which is actually improves the predictability through the stages, through the stage gates based on evidences. See here, when you talk about the AA projects, the many AA projects fail is often 80% based on the case study. So due to weak project management, misaligned business goals, and poor data preparation, okay. So here the failure is usually the execution plus alignment depth. It is not the algorithm weakness, by the way, right? So here the misalignment, right? The misalignment actually creates success in lab, the failure in business due to the unclear outcome, right? So the poor data readiness collapses the timeline via the hidden work, and also this will be actually end up with the rework cycles. So in the CPM approaches, the CPM model, I mean the CPM AI addresses these issues by embedding the AI specific PM practices focused on business understanding, data feasibility, and iterative development model approaches. It actually starts with the problem framing plus the feasibility. Problem framing plus feasibility. So before you build or before you invest heavily on the particular XYZ approaches, the CPM actually address the issues. It actually makes the data feasibility explicit, and also few other parameters like availability, quality, and the bias, the privacy thing, right? And when you talk about the delivery, like here we are just moving from the operational iteration into the delivery focus. So the incremental value, which is actually controlling the risk, and this will enable the continuous learning approaches. Okay, so AA projects, they don't fail on models, they actually fail on the alignment and the data and executions. Alignment and data and execution. So here, the need for an approach to successfully run the managed AI projects, successfully run AI managed projects. So the traditional project management, the traditional PM and app development methods, they don't fully handle the AI project's complexity. Okay, they don't actually handle the pure AI project's complexity. So here the AI delivery has the non-determinism model. For example, the model performance varies, right? Unlike the deterministic software, right? So the critical path, which includes the data readiness and experimentation and the validation, it is not about just a build and test model approaches. Okay, in this scenario, the governance, right? The governance must manage the risk, drift, and then adoption, not only the scopes and then scope schedules. Okay, and the AI solutions are data-driven model, not just a software-driven. All right, it is actually need the systemic approaches. It is need a systemic approaches, and also it is need a systemic pattern. Okay, so when you talk about the systemic pattern, the data is the fuel. Data is the fuel here. Okay, and when I talk about the delivery must be integrate the data engineering and the machine learning and the product and then operations as a one system. So here, the data engineering, ML, and the product and operation should not maintain the vertical, also should not maintain any of the bias or any of the vertical silos. So the AI approaches the CPM AI model ensure the data preparation, governance are in the place. It's actually ensure the alignment, business, objective, and then the ROI as well. So here we will start with the value hypothesis and define the success metrics upfront. Will be define success metric upfront. So here we'll just keep the priorities anchored to outcomes, not just the model sophistications. In this scenario, we just use the increments released to validate the ROI, the early stage, and also we follow the pattern repeatedly, which means we follow the pattern continuously. Okay, this actually ensure the data preparation governance on the single place, as I mentioned, right? It's actually makes the data readiness explicit, like availability, quality, access, security, and then complaints as well. So this data preparation governance model, when you keep in the place, this actually ensure the guardrails, the ownership, and then stewardship, and then approval pods as well. This approaches reduces the rework by treating the governance as an enabler of speed. So here we don't consider governance as different vertical, or we don't consider governance or the separate silo system. And these approaches ensure the robust model evaluation plus the operationalization, right? So when you talk about the robust model evaluation, so evaluation, it's a multi-dimensional here, like accuracy, bias, safety, cost, latency, and reliability, right? So here the operation, when you talk about the operation, the operationalization requires the machine learning and then ops, right? For the monitoring, drift detections, and retaining the rollback. So here the DevOps concept also we follow, right? Fix forward, rollback approaches. So here the iterative development approaches keeps the model aligned as the data business approaches or the data business needs. So that when you talk about the AI delivery is not build software. It is run the learning system. The AI software, it's all about running the learning system. Okay. And addressing the AI project failures with the CPM AI, so which is one of the primary parameter or primary areas of the project managers or the project coordinators. So AI projects fails when treated like a traditional software instead of the data-centric systems. Instead of data-centric system, right? So the AI outcomes, like when you talk about the AI outcomes, are the probability is very high for the success. Okay, so again, it is depends on the data quality, context, and then data drift. Okay, and when I talk about the requirements evolve through the learning. Requirements evolve through the learning, right? And this is the real risk. So when you talk about the real risk here, the real risk is the data plus adoption and then operations, not just the coding or the testings, by the way, right? So the importance of CPMAI here is to reduce the risk by focusing on business alignment, data feasibility, and the real world evaluation, right? So when you talk about data feasibility and operationalization and iterative development model or iterative delivery, see, it actually brings the discipline life cycle from the problem framing to production readiness. Okay, and the CPA model makes the uncertainty visible the early stage, and also this manages through the evidence-based decisions. So this approaches turns AI into the repeatable capability with the governance and feedback loops or the feedback approaches. Okay. And when you talk about the business alignment define the purpose, measurable ROI, success criteria, and the secure stakeholder buy-in before it's built. Okay. So here they define the value hypothesis and the success metrics before building the models before building the models. It's actually align the stakeholders on the decision model approaches, okay, which is decision model approaches, DCA for DMA. And also here, people they will consider the trade-off and they will think about what good looks like, right? It's actually prevent the cool model, the no impact, by keeping the delivery tied to the business outcome. Always the CPM model approaches help us to focus on the business outcome. And when you talk about data feasibility, the data feasibility confirm the data availability, quality, and governance really to avoid the downstream the derailments. Okay, so when you talk about the data feasibility, it confirms the data readiness, accesses, and the completeness, and the bias and the privacy things, right? So it's actually reduced the downstream and again, this reduces the downstream by exposing the hidden data work upfront, right? When you talk about the operation plus iteration model approaches, the production AI needs the ML ops. The production AI needed ML ops, like a monitoring, drift reduction, and then retraining and the rollback. It's actually evaluate the real world conditions and accuracy and cost and latency. Okay. The iterative model approaches, right? The iterate continuously using the telemetry and feedback model to sustain ROI over the period of time. To sustain ROI over the period of time. Okay. So when I talk about the AI don't go live, it stays alive, by the way. Okay. It's the CPMAI, how we professionalize AI delivery. The CPMAI model help us. How do we professionalize our AI delivery? It's actually align the business and prove the data feasibility, validate the real conditions, and operationalize with the monitoring and the iteration model approaches. So the models, they don't just launch, they perform and improve in the production. They perform and they improve in the productions. Okay. And these are the 7 patterns of the AI. So let's say the conversation and the human interactions, predictive analytics and the decisions, goal-driven system and autonomous systems and the patterns and anomalies and then hyper personalizations. So let's explore all these 7 patterns of the AI, the CPM AI. Okay. So when you talk about the conversational and the human interactions, so goal is to enable the AM systems interact via the natural language, typed or spoken with the human users. Let's say, for example, Siri and some giving some prompt comments, right? So when you talk about the goals, here the user, they just start with the user intent journey, not the bot interface here. Okay, it's actually defined the success as a task completion, not the chat quality here. The goal is not about the chat quality. Okay, and when you talk about the um, design for the handoff plus escalation. So the system stays safe and then useful here. Okay. So for example, chatbots for customer service, right? The virtual assistants, voice control assistants, right? Um, it's actually a big use case with a clear value. It is actually a deflection, speed, consistency, and the 24 by 7 support, right? So treat assistance as a product capability. It is actually embedded in the workflows, not as a side tool. It has to be embedded as a workflow. Okay. So when we are embedding as a workflow, it is actually help us to validate the early stage with the pilots in one domain. Then you can scale the horizontally, right? And when you talk about the data requirements, so the data requirements like a text transcripts, audio labels, and intent entities, right? So the data readiness is the critical path, like coverage, quality, privacy, and then governance. Okay, it's actually labeling the strategy. So the strategy must be defined here. Strategy is must be defined. So for example, let's say the intent, taxonomy and entity model and ground truth, right? So here the labeling strategy must be defined by the users. Okay. And when you talk about the plan, here we will have to plan for the continuous data, so which is nothing but a feedback loops and retraining cadences and then monitoring process. Okay. And when I talk about the feedback approaches, again, it is actually aligned with the iterative model approaches. So when you talk about the key pitfalls here, the key pitfalls, ambiguity and domain jargon. So it's need for the updated training data. So language is actually dynamic. Okay. So here the managed slang, the new products, policy changes through the iterative or through the iteration. So when you are managing through the iteration, which is actually reduces the ambiguity with the product design, with the prompt design, and let's say clarification questions, and then maintain the guardrails. So when it is maintaining these 4 parameter: product design, prompt design, and clarification questions, and then the guardrails. When you are maintaining these four parameters, you can easily manage your operational updates become easy to manage, like a monitoring drift or review the failures and refresh data routinely. So managing this parameter will become very easy. Okay. So when you talk about the conversational AI, the conversational AI is a product. Is a purely we should understand these are the product powered by the data, sustained by the operations. So please remember the conversational AI, it's a product which is actually powered by the data and sustained by the operational or operations. Okay. So in the CPM AI, the conversational AI succeeds when you treat it is as an operating model and align on the outcome, the prove the data feasibility. All right. And when I talk about design, the design for safety and escalation. So these parameters are important here. All right. And when I talk about the other parameters of the data, the goal, I mean, the second burden of the CPM AI, the goal is to classify or extract the meaningful information from the unstructured input, such as images, audio, and then documents, images, audios, or the documents, right? So when we talk about this particular conventional convert unstructured signals into the decisions ready data, it's actually help us the decisions ready data. It's actually define so what first and what decision next. So literally what next decision it is up this particular model we call them it's a flow based approaches model data. So based on that, you can improve the workflow. And also here you will have to treat the performance and the end-to-end utility like accuracy, latency, or the cost or the risk or whatever. Okay. So for example, the image recognition, right, which is the detecting objects or the faces, like for example, the biometric or the face detection unlock option, and the speech to text, handwriting extractions, right? So this model choose use cases where the automation removes the frictions. For example, the faster processing, the fewer errors in the scaling level. So here, try to integrate the outputs into the workflow with the human in the loop for the exceptions. Okay, and validation is very much important. So validate the real samples in the early stage, like for example, the lab accuracy, and production reliability. Okay, so these are the examples that we can use to implement the CPM AI model. And then data requirements. When you talk about the data requirements, it's a large labeled data sets handled with the real world variability. Okay. So the data strategy is the critical path here. So maintaining the data strategy, it is actually very critical path. Okay. And converge labeling quality and then responsiveness, right? So when you are converging the labeling quality and then responsiveness, you need to capture the variability by designs like a lighting, noise, accents, formers, and the handwriting styles, whatever, so that you can establish the ground truth, right? When you are establishing the ground truth, so it is actually equal. It is actually added to versioning. So the learning is repeatable in the repeatable and also auditable over the period of time. Okay. But when you talk about the key pitfalls here, the key pitfalls again the ethical concerns, the pure in the ethical concerns, right? So in this scenario, bias emerges when the training data doesn't reflect the real world diversity and edge cases. Okay. So when I talk about the privacy thing, the privacy and the consent must be explicit, especially with a biometric and pill. Okay. So the unstructured in the decisions data or converting from unstructured data into the decision model approaches. So here the CPM AI makes the classification extraction successful by the anchoring the work. Okay. So anchoring the work that is based on the business decisions. Based on the business provision decisions, this will provide the data feasibility under the real world variability. Okay. And third approaches, it's a patterns and then anomalies, right? So here the goal is to identify when data points deviate from norm or discover the hidden patterns in the data, predefined labels, data and without predefined labels. Okay. So when you talk about here, it is more into shift from the prediction to the early warning. Early warning. Okay. So see, when you talk about the early warning, it is warning plus the risk reductions for the operational decisions. Reduction decision for the deduction for the operational decisions. Okay, it's actually defined the normal as a business baseline, not just a statical baseline. So here we have to understand the business baseline and then the statical baseline. Okay, there are some examples: the fraud detection, data requirements, key pitfalls, right? So the examples, the high value use cases where minutes matter, right? So like loss prevention and downtime avoidance security, right? So here the pairing deductions with the responsive playbook, so the insights translate into the measurable outcome. And when you talk about the data requirements, the data readiness, and then you can use the historical data to calibrate the threshold and then reduce the noisy alerts, right? And when I talk about the key pitfalls, maybe I would say false positive skills adoption, right? The false positive feasibility, I would say. It actually kills the adoption or the adaptation, right? So anomalies actually evolve the concept drift. It's required the continuous monitoring and then recalibration is important here. Continuous monitoring and then the recalibration is important. Okay. And see, when you talk about anomaly detection, the anomaly detection is only the valuable when the alert actually triggered the right action fast. Okay. So here the CPMAI makes the anomaly detection the sustainable by anchoring the normal to the business outcomes. So normal to the business outcome. So that's the purpose of using, or that's the purpose of implementing the CPM AI in the projects. And the other aspects, the predictive analytics versus the decision support. Okay. So here, the decision supports are very much important, right? So the goal is to like forecast our outcomes or trends using the historical data, and support the human decision making with the data driven insights. Human decision making with the data driven insights. So the data-driven insights, it is nothing but the evidence-based management or the evidence-based process. It is actually shift from the repeating to the forward-looking decisions, like what will happen, what to do, right? It's actually defined the prediction as an input to the decision system, not an answer by itself, by the way. These particular approaches tie our forecast to actions, for example, threshold, triggers, and then playbooks. Examples here, the sales forecasting and the churn prediction, it's a demand planning and the revenue projections, right? So here the prioritize the use case with the clear levels like a pricing, redemption offers, inventory, and capacity and capabilities, okay? It's actually embed insights into the operational cadence like a weekly planning or SNOP or the pipeline reviews, whatever, and it's actually validate our business impact via pilots. For example, like lift savings, the risk reductions, these approaches. And data requirements. When you talk about the data requirements, it's actually ensure the feature readiness, like a time series, signal, and seasonality, promotions, and the external drivers. So the data quality and consistency will be maintaining the consistency. So the data quality and the consistency drive the accuracy more than the algorithms, the algorithms. Okay. And here, planning, retraining plus governance is very much important, like a data for the data fresh and model versioning and the monitoring process. So for that, here we need to have a planned retraining is very much important. And the key pitfalls is the data drift can occur if external conditions like a market changes, seasonality shift, all right? So here, the market shift plus drift, right? It requires the continuous performance checks and then the recalibration. So the recalibration is very much important here. It's actually go against the automation bias. Like it's actually keeps the keep human in the loop for the exceptions and the overrides. It's actually measure the right metric like accuracy, decision effort cost, and then trust, and then new adaptation. See, remember when I talk about the forecast don't create the value, decisions do, or decision does create the value. Okay, so in the CPM model, the CPM AI that turns the predictive analytics into the enterprise capability by connecting the forecast to decision workflow, like engineering features, the data governance, and then operational drift management. So the model stay reliable in changing conditions, and the leaders they just use them the disciplined human judgment and other parameters. it's a hybrid it's a hybrid personalization. All right. So goal is to the personalize the content and the recommendations for each individual's users based on past behaviors and context in near or real time. Okay. So if the goal is the personalized context or the recommendations for the each individuals, so there are some approaches. So here we will have to treat the personalized as a decision engine. So maybe right content, right movement, or the right channels. Okay, it's actually define the context. It's actually define the context explicitly, like intent, session signals, or the constraints, or the life cycle stage, whatever. So these approaches help us to optimize for the business, not only business but also the customer outcomes. Customer outcomes are, let's say, the conversion and what else? Um, Retention, satisfaction, and the trust, right? So some example here, the product recommendations and personalized media streams, dynamic website content. It's actually start with the high leverage placements like a homepage, search ranking, checkouts, upsells, or the next best actions. So they use the experimentation as the governance, like for example, A/B test, the holdouts, and uplifts. So these all are not just the opinions, by the way. Okay. And the data requirement, when I talk about data requirement, the detailed user histories plus robust privacy protections. So here, the build a build a complaint data foundation, like consent and excuse me, and a purpose limitation and retention across the controls. Okay, and again, establish the identity resolution very carefully, like anonymous, known mapping, and then the minimizing linkage risk. So this will ensure the data quality. So data quality, there are some even the taxonomy attributions, right? So always we need to check these biases continuously. When I talk about the key pitfalls here, like privacy validations from over collections, right? So bias or stage recommendations if the retraining is not the frequent. So here collect less user data and the user's data the smarter, like a data minimization plus privacy by design guardrails. So these are the blended combinations. Okay. So prevent the feedback loops here, right? It's actually filter the bubbles, popularity bias, and the cold start gaps here. It's actually runs a continuous freshness controls like a drift monitoring, retain cadence, or the human review. So the personalization wins only when the trust scales with the relevance. So the CPM model, as I mentioned, right, this actually makes the personalization sustainable by aligning recommendation goals to measurable outcomes. It's actually, let's say, when I talk about the measurable outcome, it is including the engineering privacy and the governance So the engineering privacies and governance, these are the first class requirement. And the operationalizing and continuous learning. So these other two parameters important in order to avoid from false positive feasibility. So based on that, the relevance can be improved without sacrificing the ethics or compliance or the customer trust. Okay. Autonomous system. So we all know the autonomous system here, the goal and example, dynamic data requirements, as I said, right? So the goal is system or the agents with the minimal human intervention and adopt in the real-time dynamic environment. Real-time dynamic environment, right? So what is the real-time dynamic environment? So here we will have to explore the real-time dynamic environment, define the autonomy level boundaries, what the agent can decide versus must escalate, some sort of decisions. Okay. For example, the self-driving vehicles, warehouse robots, and autonomous drones, automated process agents. So here it's include the human in the loop patterns like override, kill switch, or audit trials. Okay. And the data requirements, it's a real-time sensor data plus robust simulation and simulation data for the training and testings. So here you can use the simulation to cover the edge cases like rare events and adversarial conditions and the safety scenarios. Okay, so validate data continuously like a recalibration or the calibration drift or the sensor noise or the missing signals, whatever. Okay. The pitfall, yes. So the compliance is not the optional, by the way, like a traceability and the explainability. So these are highly recommended. These are not just an optional, by the way. So in autonomy, the work most of the time it's still a failure. So the CPM actually keeps the autonomous AI project successful by focusing early clarity on autonomy boundaries, building a dual test strategy like a real world and simulation and operational method or operational safety, monitoring process, and compliance. So when you talk about the complaints here, the complaints are not non-negotiable one. Okay. On top of that, the non-negotiable deliverables. So when you focus on all these parameters, the system behave can easily predictable, even edge conditions. So end of the day, we just need to predict the systems, right? Yes. Again, the GDS, which is the goal-driven system, the goal-driven system again focus on the optimized towards the defined objective under constraints often by searching or planning possible strategies. Searching or planning possible strategies. So when we talk about the goal-oriented system or goal-driven system, or you can call them goal-driven development system, okay? It's actually start with the clarity, like objective functions, success metrics, and the trade-off, like which is most into cost versus time versus quality. Okay, so here we have to choose the approach which actually fit for the purpose. For example, the scheduling and routing, the gameplay like a chess or Go, like a dynamic resource allocation. Sometime the oral. Okay, so the models which actually help you to take the decision make or to help you to create the decision loops like a state, action, reward, feedback. Okay. And the decisions for operation also we need to consider like a replan for cadence and exception handling, human overrides. So here we will have to focus on these three parameters. When we talk about the data requirements, like accurate the representation of environment, constraints, and objective functions. So here, build the decision-ready data set, like entities, data, rules, calendars, capabilities, and then cost. So these approaches validate the assumption what is actually measurable versus estimator. Okay. Pitfalls, yes. Pitfall, the guardrail for the deployment, like monitoring the plan, quality, drift, and constraint violations. Okay, so if you can't write the objective, you cannot optimize the outcome. So writing objective is very much important, no matter what. In this particular personalization of project, right? The whenever whenever you use the CPM AI in the project, the optimization projects succeed when we treat them like a decision, okay, or the tool for the decision making. So when you focus on decision for the decision making process, evidence based process, or the false positive feasibility process, so these approaches will help us to stay away from the pitfalls. Okay, and how these patterns align with the CPM AI. So there are some phases. So regardless of AI patterns, the chatbot or autonomous drone or the CPM AI lifecycle, right? So there are some phases. The phase one that clarify the business need, for example, reduce call center load, right? Phase two, validate data feasibility, and phase three, do the data preparation, labeling, and the cleaning, and again 4 and 5. I think Mr. 5 here. Okay, so it's a proceed through the model development evaluation and then operationalization to the production use. So when how these patterns align with the CPM AI, right? So actually, when you talk about this particular pattern, it actually keeps the team aligned to outcomes like a data readiness, risk control, and then the iteration. The phase one actually, that clarify the business needs, right? It's actually define the problem statement, target users, and then decisions to improve. Phase two, yes, validating approaches, the data preparation, success model, right? Again, when you talk about the success model approaches, we can use these 7 patterns of AI to identify and clarify these behaviors like data requirements, scope complexity vary, iterations expected, pitfalls. So these 7 AI patterns are the shortcut to predict needed data, resources, and then methods. So in this scenario, CPM AI ensures the business validation and data feasibility and iterative development for the any pattern. And also, as you can see here, these are the 6 patterns or the 6 phases of the CPM AI. I just showed you, right? Business understanding, data preparation, data model development, model evaluation, and then the model operationalization. Okay. So here, first phase, business understanding. It's a more into AI projects start with the clearly defining the business problem in the intent to solve. It's a more into identify or addressing the problem statement. In the CPM phase one, the project teams they determine why AI is needed. It is more into understanding the implementation. Again, phase two, data understanding. The data understanding, the purpose of data understanding is to again define the clarify the requirement and remove the bottleneck. Data preparation, the data preparation that is more into for implementation perspectives, and again the model development establish the business case, which is confirm the data needs and prepare the usable data, right, including the AI ML approaches and model evaluation. So after the preliminary model is built, the verifier truly meets the needs defined in the earlier the CPM phases. So which means it is more into understanding or validating our business assumptions or the business hypotheses. Okay. Again, the model for the operationalization. So here, even highly accurate AI has no business value until it's deployed in production. Right? So here the CPM AI approaches, it's actually help us to integrate the validate the model into system and the workflow by incremental development approaches. So there are some roles is required here in order to implement. Okay. So successfully delivering the AI initiative requires the more than just a technology and the tools. It involves a cross-functional team, a culture that embraces the data-centric thinking and committed executive sponsorship. So these are some roles of the AI project associate, AI project lead, project manager, data engineer, business analyst, data scientist, and executive sponsors. Okay. So here, the difference between the traditional model approaches and then the CPMAI model and then traditional model approaches. So the CP model approaches, which is actually focused, it's a value focused. It starts with the business alignment, measurable ROI. But the traditional project management, it's often start with the scope, schedule, cost as the primary drivers, right? It's a gold iron triangle. Okay. The CPM model, the core asset, CPMA is the data asset or data centric, data feasibility, quality governance. But the traditional model approaches more into software work plan centric. Like the big upfront commitments here. CPM is a more into delivery flow, but this is more into the stage gate milestones or the stage gate approaches. The CPM model talks about the quality validation, but the traditional model talks about the traditional PM validates the mainly functional correctness and then UAT approaches, right? CPM AI go live success because the CPM AI includes the operationalization, MLOps, and the monitoring governance and the continuous improvement. But the traditional model align as a hands off and then endpoint. Okay. Thank you, everyone, and thank you for joining the call. Let's have a quick Q&As. If you have any questions, you can just drop your questions on the chat window. Any questions? Mr. Vishnu and Gideon, please check with the teams. Please check with the audience if they have any questions on the chat window. We can just quickly go through the questions.
Hi guys, do you have any questions? You can ask Vishnu.
Any questions about the data validation, data engineering, data modeling? Any questions? Okay. Thanks, Anthony Somin. All right. Any other questions from your side? And thanks, everyone, and thanks for joining the call. And for the recording, you can just reach out to our support team, and they will provide the recording access. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. Bye-bye.